If I had known that Emily wouldn't come back from that trip the same, I would have never crossed the forest's edge. But the worst part is, whatever came back with her is still there, waiting. For me. Emily. That name echoes in my mind. I still hear her voice. Sometimes a faint whisper, other times a clear call. She was my best friend. We had known each other for years. Emily had something that drew people in. Courage, curiosity, a need to reach places where others were too afraid to go. But her curiosity took us too far. It started a few weeks before the trip. She called me late at night, her voice filled with excitement. I found something, in the mountains, a trail no one talks about. It's not on any map. It has to be something special. You have to come with me. At that moment, her words sounded innocent. Just another trip, like the many we had taken before. I agreed without hesitation. But there was something different in her voice. A kind of impatience, like she had to go. The day of the trip was bright and cool. The mountains in the distance looked calm, and the air smelled fresh. For the first few hours of the hike, we talked as always. We laughed, reminiscing about our past trips. Emily spoke about articles she had read, about hidden places in the mountains, ancient rituals. But the higher we climbed, the quieter it became. The trail grew steeper. Fog began to gather, even though it was only early afternoon. At one point I looked toward the forest that started on our left. It was strange. No movement, no birds, no insects. The trees stood still, as if watching us in silence. I told Emily about it, but she only smiled without conviction. "It's just the forest," she said, shrugging. "They're there, waiting." I stopped. "Who? Who's waiting?" Emily looked at me as if she had just woken from a dream. "Nothing. Never mind." We reached an old shelter just before nightfall. It was abandoned, but the door wasn't locked. Inside, there was a damp, unpleasant smell of rotting wood. I shouldn't have stayed there. Emily seemed strangely focused. Without a word, she sat by the window, staring into the wall of fog that began to swallow the forest. When I asked what she was doing, she simply said, "Listening." That night, I couldn't sleep. Emily lay in her sleeping bag beside me, breathing shallowly. Outside, there was total silence, and then I heard it. Whispers. Quiet, barely audible, but distinct. Words in a language I didn't understand. They weren't random. They sounded like a repeated melody. I got up, walked to the window. The glass was fogged. When I wiped it with my sleeve, my heart froze. A handprint. But it wasn't a normal handprint. The hand was too large. The fingers, long and thin, as if they didn't belong to a human. I screamed. Emily suddenly opened her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked sleepily. On the window, someone was there. She looked at the glass, then back at me. Her face had gone pale. "There's nothing there," she whispered. "It's them knocking." The next morning, Emily was completely different. Silent, indifferent. When I asked if she felt okay, she only nodded. "We have to go further. To the summit." We hadn't planned to climb to the summit. It was too dangerous. But Emily wouldn't listen. The trail narrowed and grew steeper than anything I had ever seen. With every step, the silence around us thickened. And then Emily began to speak. Words in a language I didn't know, rhythmic, melodic. Each sentence echoed back from the slopes. But something was wrong. The echo repeated her words before she spoke them, as if someone else was speaking along with her. By the time we reached the summit, the sun was beginning to set, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. A stone circle. It looked ancient, too ancient for no one to know about it. In the center of the circle stood a chest, covered in moss, cracked, as if it had been waiting there for centuries. Emily walked into the circle without hesitation. I couldn't move. "Emily," I shouted, "let's go back." She turned to me slowly. "We have always been here," she said. But it wasn't her voice. When she opened the chest's lid, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. Dark smoke rose from cracks in the earth. The shadows around us stretched longer. And then I saw what she pulled from the chest. A mask, old, wooden. Its surface cracked. The eye holes were too large, too dark. Emily placed it on her face. That wasn't Emily anymore. Her body stiffened. She moved like a puppet. "You came." The voice that came from her mouth wasn't hers. It was unnaturally deep, echoing. The shadow behind her was too large. It wasn't human. Something stood there. I ran. I don't remember how long. But I know I heard footsteps behind me. When I finally dared to glance back, I saw her, Emily, or something that looked like Emily, standing at the edge of the circle, staring at me. "Come back," she said. But it wasn't her voice. Months have passed. Emily never returned. The police say she probably fell into a ravine. But I know that's not true. Sometimes at night I hear her voice. "Come back." And the worst part is, I know that eventually I will. This isn't a story about what happened. It's a story about what's still happening. Because in the mountains, the echo doesn't always repeat your words. Sometimes it repeats what something else, something waiting, wants you to hear.